Joel Lane lived in the house right behind me. He's the man who sold 1,000 acres to the state of North Carolina in 1792. And so that's the reason Raleigh is here, because he lived in this house, he sold that land, and the capital was then created. It's the oldest home in the county, built about 1769. It cost £2,378, which was a great deal of money in those days. We keep hoping we'll find a portrait of him, and someone can, at least we'll know what he looked like. Maybe some descendant has one in their attic somewhere around the country, but so far, not yet. He was a fifth-generation colonist, was born 60 miles northeast of here in Halifax, North Carolina, and when he was about 30, came here, purchased this land, and shortly after that built this house. He then served as state senator for 14 terms. He was entry taker for the county, which means he was in charge of the land entries when people were claiming land. He did many other things. In fact, he was a delegate to both the constitutional conventions that were held in North Carolina. When they walk in the front door, a very grand, for the time period, staircase. It's quite wide. It has many steps. It takes up the whole foyer, we would call it today. They called it the front passage. And the idea behind it, in my opinion, was Joel Lane wanted someone to walk in the front door and see, oh my gosh, this is a gorgeous home. This man is very important. It's significant not only in its size, but in the fact that it's there at all. Because in a smaller home in this period, the front door would open just into the main room, the hall, what we would call the dining room. But he built a separate room called the passage for the front door to open into, and thereby keeps the hall and the parlor, the other two rooms at the front, more secluded. And not everyone would be allowed in those rooms. Depending on their status, whatever reason they were there, they might never get past the passage, but they would be very impressed when they walked in. We have a few things that belong to the Lane family and the Hinton family, his wife's family. We also have on loan a desk that we believe belonged to Joel Lane, made of walnut, which is absolutely gorgeous. It gives us an amazing way to interpret his life, because we can easily imagine him sitting there at the stroke of a pen, changing forever the lives of his wives, his children, and the enslaved people who lived here. It was a seat of power, because that's what white men had in this time period. They had the power. There were 4 major meetings that took place that we know of. We've well documented. The first happened in 1771 when the Wake County was first created. We didn't have a courthouse, so the Wake County Court met here in Joel Lane's hall, which we would call a dining room, the largest room in the house. Then during the Revolution, in the early on, the State Council of Safety met here. Then after that, in 1781, the State Senate met here. And finally, in 1792, the 6 men who were tasked with choosing the site for the Capitol not only met here, but they stayed here. In 1795, when he died, he held 32 enslaved people here of varying ages, from very young children to older folks. They were the backbone of the economy, in my opinion. He could not have done the things that he did politically if he'd been at home behind a plow, having to plow the fields to feed his family. The horror of slavery is the deprivation that they experienced, but the thought of that is just unconscionable to a modern human being, and I think to many people in the 18th century. They realized that these were people and they were not being treated correctly, but the system was just so difficult to untangle. There was a lot of money there tied up in their enslaved people, and it was very, very hard for most people to let go of that and basically give freedom to people who were very valuable, in whom they'd invested a great deal of money. We're so fortunate that this house is still standing. So many of our landmarks are gone. The only reason this is the oldest house, it's not the first house, but all the older ones are no longer here. It's just a place where we can come and think about our ancestors and how they founded not just the city and not just the county, not just the state, but the country, because his story is illustrative of the whole United States and what all our ancestors went through in founding this country. The deprivation they experienced, the hard times, and then the good times as well. So I think it's a wonderful lesson just in American history how you come to a new place, you pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you make good.